Kevin Hassett is with me, the former chair of the President Trump's Council of Economic Advisors, who helped draft and put together the first bailout or the first care plan. Kevin, this is depressing. The two sides in Congress can't agree. The House puts forward a plan. The Republicans can't agree it. The president does executive orders that some say are unconstitutional and in any case won't work. It's downright depressing.
You know, you're right, it's depressing, and it seems like every time we legislate in Washington that happens. But the unconstitutionality, that argument is just incorrect. So I know you like to focus on the facts. Let's look at the two main ones. In terms of the payroll tax, the Treasury Secretary under the IRS regulations has the authority to defer tax liabilities for up to a year. And in a time of emergency, he can even extend it past that. And so the payroll tax deferral is very, very well-established part of the code. Now, you're right that to forgive it, the president would have to legislate, but he could definitely forgive the payroll tax for a year right now, and that would be fully consistent with existing law. In terms of the unemployment insurance benefit, you know, they've got enough money in the emergency fund to fund, I think, about $44 billion worth of unemployment insurance. And it is an emergency. And so I think that, you know, those funds also could go there quite legally. Finally, and I promise you that I'm not going to filibuster, the thing is that the president has put the Democrats in a really awful position for them negotiation-wise, because if they litigate this, then they're trying to take benefits away from ordinary people. If they don't litigate this, then President Trump gets a big victory. And so my guess is they're going to come back to the table and try to legislate instead.
But the mere fact that the two sides were unable to agree on something and allowed the $600 to expire, let's put it crudely, you and I are not short of the price of a cup of tea and will not be short if a month or two goes by. But the people who this was meant to help are living month to month, week to week, day to day. Do you not think that politicians should be hanging themselves in shame at their inability to make this sort of, basically do their job?
No, you're exactly right. And I think the president's right to use the emergency funds to help those folks out, just as you suggest. But it is very frustrating that the talks broke down. But I want to put the Democrats' ask in perspective. They're asking for almost $1 trillion in bailouts for the states. State spending, you know, it's about $3 trillion a year. So for the rest of the year, it's about $1.5 trillion in normal times. And so they're basically asking the federal government to pick up almost the entire budget, or a significantly more than half of their spending for the rest of the year. And so really, it's not about COVID emergency spending. It's about trying to bail out blue states that were broke before COVID. And that was something that Republicans were just never going to swallow.
No, but that's not entirely the full picture, Kevin, in the sense that you take somewhere like New York, which has not only had the increased healthcare costs with COVID, but also will have a dramatic reduction in revenue, sales tax revenue and business revenue and property taxes and all the other things. So to some extent, the states are looking to central government, one way and t'other from the federal government, to help make up that shortfall.
Right, but the question is how big a shortfall is it going to be? It looks like GDP this year might be as much as 10% below what it was a year before. You know, and the bailout that they're asking for the states is more like 40%, say, of spending for the year, and so that they're asking for way more money than GDP is coming up short. And they're doing that basically because there are a bunch of blue states that were broke before this happened. And they're holding, you know, the poor folks who need their unemployment insurance hostage in order to try to bail out their friends. And so, you know, I think that the Republicans have pretty high ground on this one. And, you know, me, I don't always, I'm not a partisan guy, at least I try not to be. And if I were going to call it the other way, I would. But right now, I think the president's put the Democrats kind of on the ropes. I think that they have to come back and legislate, and they're going to have to move off of this massive bailout of the blue states. You know, I was in the Senate hearing room negotiating the Phase 3 deal, as you mentioned in the introduction. And I can remember that at one point the Democrats came forward with bailouts for the states, and the Republicans are kind of like, well, you know, our states, our red states have been, you know, very careful to build rainy day funds, and, you know, we're a little bit short, but we got money in our rainy day fund for that. And why should you take money from my state and give it to your state that's been reckless with spending? And pretty much that shut the thing mostly down back then. But the Democrats are trying again now, and I think they're going to fail again.
how much of all of this? Oh, actually, it's a naive question, but yeah. But you are in the room as you've just said, Kevin. How much of it is positioning for the election, which is less than 100 days from now? Both sides. The president is trying to say, look what I've done, look what I've done. The Democrats trying to say, we needed more, we needed more. The Republicans in Congress, I'm not sure what they're trying to say.
You know, I think up until now, up until the phase 4, it's been pretty remarkable how bipartisan it's been. I think, Richard, you've watched economies for the longest time. I don't think you've ever seen a negative shock as big as the second quarter. And yet, you know, the jobs numbers have been rebounding in a way that it's shocked me. It's probably shocked you too. And I think that the reason is there was this massive policy response that, you know, passed with unanimous consent. You know, every Democrat, every Republican voted for it. And so now we're in a phase 4 deal. I think the fact that the jobs numbers surprised on the upside takes a little bit of the emergency pressure off of folks. And so they're playing more traditional politics this time around. I expect the Democrats will come back to the table and that they'll still get to a pretty good deal that splits the difference more or less, and that they'll do so in the next week or two.
So let's move from politics and skate to thicker ice of economics. On this jobs question, the job numbers were better, absolutely, but the fear is twofold, isn't it? Firstly, that after September, October, there's not even a second wave, but the hardened job losses start to hit. And the second thing is that output never recovers to where it was. Historically, it doesn't happen, and therefore we are entrenching into this long-term unemployed.
Right. I think to state your risks the way I've been talking about it since January, just slightly differently. If we wake up and, you know, we've got 7%, say, less GDP than we did at the start, then we've got way too much physical capacity. And so why would anyone engage in capital spending? And people would probably lay off workers as well. And so when COVID clears up, and you know, God willing, it'll be soon, then, you know, people are going to look at their capacity and they're going to look at their demand. And it could be that capacity is way in excess of what you need to meet demand. And that's a big risk going forward. And I think that's one reason why it's so important that we sort of stop the squabbling and get a really big phase 4 deal through right now.
And your answer, sir, is the main reason we love having you on Quest Means Business. Bridging politics and economics in the elegance too. So thank you, Kevin. It is always good to have you. Thank you very much.